Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us on another book reading on Reading with Queen Bee. I am reading the book Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. And joining me is my dog Rampy. As you can see, he is actually tired. And if you remember from the last episodes, Rampy likes to just listen to me read the story because he gets to take a little snoozer. So if you have been following me on YouTube, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, Reading with Queen Bee. And I know a lot of you have been enjoying the book reading of Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. We are starting chapter 15 today. And if you remember a little bit, Opal now has a couple more friends, more than one. And now we are actually going back into the Herman W. Block Library with Miss Franny Block. So let's see what happens in chapter 15. The Herman W. Block Memorial Library's air conditioning unit didn't work very good, and there was only one fan. And from the minute me and Winn-Dixie got in the library, he hogged it all. He lay right in front of it and wagged his tail and let it blow his fur all around. Some of his fur was pretty loose and blew right off of him like a dandelion puff. And if you've ever seen dandelion puffs, they grow in the grass and you just pick them up and you blow on them and they just flutter away. And they're really beautiful, but if you have allergies, they're really bad. I worried about him hogging the fan, and I worried about the fan blowing him bald. But Miss Franny said not to worry about either thing, that Winn-Dixie could hog the fan if he wanted, and she had never in her life seen a dog made bald by a fan. So if you can visualize that, if a fan blew air really, really strong, do you think that a dog will go bald? No. So Miss Franny Block reassured Opal that Winn-Dixie's hair will be just fine. He won't go bald. Sometimes when Miss Franny was telling a story, she would have a fit. They were small fits and they didn't last long. But what happened was she would forget what she was saying. She would just stop and start to shake like a little leaf. And when that happened, Winn-Dixie would get up from the fan and sit right at Miss Franny's block side. He would sit up tall, protecting her with his ears standing up straight on his head, like soldiers. And when Miss Franny stopped shaking and started talking again, Winn-Dixie would lick her hand and lie back down in front of the fan. So Winn-Dixie is comforting Miss Franny when she's throwing her fits. And if you've ever heard people when they are telling a story and they just can't remember a name or something, a detail in their story, and they start pretty much getting anxious and be like, oh, I can't remember that name or I can't remember that. So that's what's happening with Miss Franny. She throws a fit. Whenever Miss Franny had one of her fits, it reminded me of Winn-Dixie in a thunderstorm. There were a lot of thunderstorms that summer, and we already know what happens with Winn-Dixie. He gets really crazy and starts running around back and forth and destroying everything. And I got real good at holding on to Winn-Dixie whenever they came. I held on to him and comforted him and whispered to him and rocked him just the same way he tried to comfort Miss Franny when she had her fits. Only I held on to Winn-Dixie for another reason, too. I held on to him tight so he wouldn't run away. It all made me think about Gloria Dump. I wondered who comforted her when she heard those bottles knocking together, those ghosts chattering about the things she had done wrong. I wanted to comfort Gloria Dump, and I decided that the best way to do that would be to read her a book. Read it to her loud enough to keep the ghosts away. So now that Opal is learning how to comfort people, she wants to comfort Gloria Dump. Well, she wants to comfort her against those bottles, all her ghosts from the past of all the bad things she did. And so I asked Miss Franny, I said, Miss Franny, I've got a grown-up friend whose eyes are going on her, and I would like to read her a book out loud. Do you have any suggestions? Suggestions? Miss Franny said. Yes, ma'am, I have suggestions. Of course I have suggestions. How about Gone with the Wind? What's that about? I asked her. Why, said Miss Franny, it's a wonderful story about the Civil War. The Civil War? I said. Do not tell me you have never heard of the Civil War. Miss Franny Block looked like she was going to faint. She waved her hands in front of her face. I know about the Civil War, I told her. That was the war between the South and the North over slavery. Slavery, yes, said Miss Franny. It was also about states' rights and money. It was a terrible war. My great-grandfather fought in that war. He was just a boy. Your great-grandfather? Yes, ma'am. Litmus W. Block. Now there's a story. Winn-Dixie yawned real big and lay down on his side with a thump and a sigh. I swear he knew that phrase. Now there's a story. And he knew it meant we weren't going anywhere real soon. So Miss Franny is about to tell Opal another story, and if you remember, she loves stories. Go ahead and tell it to me, Miss Franny, I said, and I sat down cross-legged next to Winn-Dixie. I pushed him in and tried to get him to share the fan, but he pretended he was asleep, and he wouldn't move. So sort of like what Rampy is doing right now. He actually is asleep. Rampy, are you asleep? Well, now he's awake. You could barely see his eyes. Oh, Ramps. I was all settled in and ready for a good story when the door banged and pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson came in. Winn-Dixie sat up and stared at her. He tried out a smile on her, but she didn't smile back, and so he lay back down. So if you remember, Winn-Dixie loves to smile, and, well, he tried to smile to Amanda, and it didn't work. I'm ready for another book, Amanda said, slamming her book down on Miss Franny's desk. Well, said Miss Franny, maybe you wouldn't mind waiting. I am telling India Opal a story about my great-grandfather. You are, of course, more than welcome to listen. It will be just 1 minute. Amanda sighed a real big dramatic sigh and stared past me. She pretended like she wasn't interested, but she was, I could tell. Come sit over here, said Miss Franny. I'll stand, thank you, said Amanda. Suit yourself, Miss Franny shrugged. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, Litmus W. Block. So that's the end of chapter 15. And for your Google question for today, or your dinner talk question, or your self-talk, do you think that Amanda and Opal will talk after Miss Franny Block tells them the story? Do you think that they'll finally talk to each other and maybe be friends? But just by looking at Amanda's character, you can tell she's just a little bit hard. Like she seems to be a little know-it-all. But Opal, with the lesson that Miss Gloria Dump gave her about not judging people, she seems to be a little bit more open and willing to maybe make the first approach and being Amanda's friend. We will see. So thank you again for joining me on another book reading of Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. Thank you to Rampy for just laying here and being a good accessory, sort of say. And please remember, if you want to keep buzzing about books, keep reading with Queen Bee. Bye.